The galaxy was vast, but in that moment, it felt cold and empty. Stars burned far away, watching like distant eyes, but none of them answered the cries echoing through space. On a dying world, the voice of a desperate alien leader carried across the void, filled with fear and sorrow. This is the Tayari people. We beg you, please, if anyone can hear us. We cannot hold much longer. The message repeated again and again, bouncing across open channels. It was not a proud call. It was not the demand of a strong empire. It was the cry of the broken, the helpless, the abandoned. The Tayari had once been proud. Their cities were bright, their fleets sharp, their culture rich with beauty. But all that pride had turned to ash the day the Kranth came. The enemy was merciless. Their ships filled the skies, their weapons burned entire continents. They spared no one, and they had already left countless worlds in ruins. Now, the Tayari were next. In the capital city, hidden beneath the ground in a fortified shelter. Hi. Speaker Relas sent the broadcast. His hands shook as he leaned over the console, his voice heavy with despair. Behind him, the sound of distant explosions rumbled through the earth. Dust drifted from the ceiling, sprinkling over the council chamber like falling snow. We thought our allies would come, Relas whispered to his council. We believed the great powers of the galaxy would not abandon us. But days have passed, and still no one answers. The elders sat in silence. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow. Some wept quietly, others simply stared at the floor, too tired even for tears. They all knew the truth. The galaxy had turned its back on them. On the surface, the streets were broken. Buildings lay in ruins, families huddled in basements, holding each other close while the night sky burned with enemy fire. Children asked their parents when help would arrive, but no parent could answer. How do you explain to a child that no one is coming? But the Tayari soldiers fought bravely, but their weapons were weak compared to the machines of the Kranth. They held barricades with trembling hands, their rifles shaking as the ground thundered beneath each blast. They were not fighting to win anymore. They were fighting simply to delay the end. Yet still the call went out, over and over. Voice traveled into the stars. If anyone can hear, please, we beg you. Our world is dying. Our people are dying. Do not let us fall alone. The silence that followed was crushing. Every time the broadcast ended, every time static filled the people felt it deep in their hearts. Emptiness. They will not come, one council member said finally, her voice flat. We are alone. The others fear the Kranth too much. They will not risk their fleets for us. Relas closed his eyes, his throat tight. He wanted to argue. He wanted to believe anyone would care enough to answer, but even he could not find the words. Above the planet, the Kranth fleet moved closer. Their ships were monstrous, jagged black silhouettes that blotted out the stars. The sight of them filled the Tayari with terror. Their engines glowed red, their weapons charged with a hum that shook the air itself. Each time they fired, another city fell into ruin. The civilians watched from the ruins, their faces glowing in the light of flames. They no longer screamed when the bombs fell. Their voices had grown too tired for screams. Instead, they sat quietly, waiting for the end. In the bunkers, the youngest of the children asked the question again. Will someone come? Their mothers pulled them close, stroking their hair, whispering lies they hoped would comfort. Yes, they said softly, help will come. But their own eyes told a different story. Then, in the control chamber, the comms officer sat up sharply. His eyes widened as the sensors flickered. Hi, speaker, he gasped. Something is moving in the void. The council turned as one, their tired eyes suddenly sharp. Relas leaned forward. What? Is it another Kranth fleet? The officer shook his head slowly, disbelief clear on his face. No, the readings are different, larger, stronger, something unknown. For the first time in many days, silence filled the chamber, not from despair, but from shock. Relas felt his heart hammer in his chest. Could it be true? Could someone have heard? Outside, the skies above the burning world began to shift. The stars themselves seemed to bend, rippling like water disturbed by an unseen force. The enemy paused, their formations tightening, their guns glowing brighter as if sensing danger. And in the void, beyond the broken horizon, something began to emerge. The broadcast was still running, Relas's words still echoing across the stars. Please, we beg you, do not let us fall alone. The universe had been silent for so long, but now, as the void trembled, the silence was about to break. The night sky above the Tayari world was no longer filled with stars. It was filled with shadows. Enemy ships moved across the heavens like great beasts of metal, their black holes glowing faintly red from the heat of their engines. Every time one of them fired, another section of the planet below turned to ash. The Kranth had no mercy. They were not conquerors who wanted slaves. They were destroyers who wanted silence. Wherever they went, life ended. But Tayari had seen entire cities vanish in firestorms, their oceans boiled, their forests turned to smoke, and still the enemy pressed forward, tireless and unstoppable. The people on the ground felt the weight of that darkness. Soldiers at the barricades watched, helplessly as enemy fire tore through their defenses. Their weapons sparked uselessly against the shields of the Kranth. Every shot they fired felt like throwing stones at a storm. Still they fought, because surrender was not in their hearts. But they knew the truth, there would be no victory here. Inside, the bunker's families sat huddled together. Mothers held their children close, whispering soft lies of safety. Fathers stared at the ceiling, hearing the thunder above, wondering how long before the next blast found them. In every corner of the planet, despair hung thick in the air. High Speaker Relas stood once again in the control chamber, his hands gripping the console until his knuckles turned white. The reports came in one after another, each one worse than the last. The eastern continent is gone. The defense line at the southern ridge has collapsed. Our last fleet is destroyed. He could hardly breathe as the truth pressed down on him. His people were being erased before his eyes, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The broadcasts continued to play on every open channel. Pleas for help, cries for mercy, desperate voices reaching into the void. But still, there was no answer. One of the elders broke the silence. "It is hopeless," she said, her voice trembling. "No one will come. We are alone." Relas wanted to argue. He wanted to shout that help was on the way, that someone out there cared enough to stand against the Kranth, but the words would not come. His throat was dry, his heart heavy. Deep inside, he feared she was right. On the surface, the enemy advanced with brutal efficiency. The Kranth moved like a machine, every strike precise, every step measured. Their soldiers landed in great waves, black armored figures marching through the ruins, cutting down anything that moved. Resistance crumbled wherever they appeared. The sound of their march was like a drumbeat of doom in one ruined city. A young Tayari soldier crouched behind broken stone. His rifle shook in his hands as the enemy passed through the streets. He could hear their voices, sharp and cold, speaking in a language he did not understand. He squeezed his weapon tight, knowing he would not live much longer. Across the planet, scenes like this repeated again and again. The Kranth were relentless, their shadows spreading like fire through dry grass. Every world they touched became silent, and now the Tayari knew it was their turn. And still, the sensors showed movement in the void. Strange readings, shifts in the stars. The comms officer reported them again, his voice uncertain. Something is there, something huge. The council turned to him, desperate for hope. "Is it more Kranth?" one elder asked. The officer shook his head slowly. "No, their signatures are different. It is something else." For a moment, the chamber was silent. No one dared to believe, but in the hearts of the people, a spark flickered. Could it be real? Could someone be coming? Relas leaned forward, his eyes locked on the displays. "Keep watching," he said. His voice was steady now, firm with a hope he did not dare show before. "If it is true, if someone is coming, then we must endure until they arrive." But endurance was not easy. Hours felt like days as the enemy bombardments shook the ground. Explosions lit the horizon, flames clawing at the sky. The Tayari people prayed silently, their eyes wet with tears. Some prayed for survival, others prayed for a quick end. Above, the Kranth grew restless. Their commanders had seen the same disturbances in space. They tightened their formations, moving ships into position, weapons glowing with menace. They were ready for anything except mercy. On the ground, the people felt the tension growing. The air seemed to hum with energy. The sky dark but alive. Something was changing. The void itself seemed to ripple like a curtain waiting to be torn. Apart, Relas whispered under his breath, a prayer to the stars. "If you hear us, if anyone hears us, now is the time. Show us we are not alone." And then, as if the universe had heard his words, the sensors spiked. Lights blazed across the displays. The comms officer gasped, his voice breaking with shock. "Something is coming through. It's not Kranth. It's not Kranth. It's massive." The council crowded around the screens, their hearts pounding. Outside, in the dark sky above the burning planet, the first shape began to emerge. At first, it was only a ripple, a distortion in the sea of stars. Then light spilt through, bending space like water pushed aside by an unseen force. The sky trembled, and from the darkness, something enormous began to emerge. The Tayari people looked upward from their shelters and ruins, their hearts pounding. Their eyes widened as the blackness tore apart, revealing a shape unlike anything they had ever seen. It was vast, a mountain of steel and fire, its surface scarred by battles long past. A warship, but not one of the Kranth. This vessel was different. Its hull was solid and heavy, built not for beauty but for survival. Engines glowed with a white fire that burned against the shadows. Rows of cannons lined its sides, their barrels glowing faintly as though hungering to speak. The Tayari had never seen such power contained in a single ship. Gasps and cries filled the bunkers. Children pressed their faces to the cracks in the walls, pointing at the sky. Mothers clutched them tight, torn between fear and awe. Soldiers at the barricades froze where they stood, staring upward as if the heavens themselves had opened. In the council chamber, the comms officer's hands shook as he read the scans. It's human, he whispered. A human warship. The words rippled through the chamber like a storm. Some council members collapsed into their seats, their strength leaving them. Others pressed their hands to their mouths, unable to speak. Relas felt his knees weaken, but he forced himself to stand tall. His voice carried in a whisper that seemed louder than any shout. The humans have come. The Kranth fleet moved. Immediately they had seen it too. Their commanders barked orders across channels, their ships shifting into formation, weapons charged, glowing brighter as energy pulsed through them. They had never feared anyone before, but even they seemed unsettled. The human ship did not speak. No transmission, no promise, no threat. It only drifted forward, slow and steady, like a predator testing the air before the hunt. Its engines hummed low, a sound so deep it rattled windows on the ground, that the Tayari waited for words that never came. Their distress calls had begged for help, but the warship offered only silence. Yet that silence felt heavier than all their screams. One soldier whispered to his comrade, his voice cracking, "Will they fight for us, or against us?" No one knew. The Kranth decided first. With a roar of vengeance, their fleet unleashed a storm. Beams of energy lanced out, tearing across the sky toward the intruder. The night lit up in blinding fire as volleys of missiles and plasma rained down. The human ship disappeared into a storm of explosions. The ground shook. The Tayari cried out, covering their ears, their eyes wide with terror. For a moment, despair returned. Had their last hope been destroyed before it even began? Then the smoke cleared. The warship was still there, its hull glowed faintly from the impacts, scars burning across its surface, but it did not fall. Slowly, almost calmly, the giant began to answer. The first shot shattered the silence. A single beam of light tore from the human ship, striking one of the Kranth vessels. The enemy ship exploded instantly, ripped apart in a fireball that painted the sky. Pieces of burning wreckage fell like meteors. Then came the second shot, then the third. Within moments, the void was alive with fury. The human warship roared, its cannons unleashing fire faster than the eye could follow. Missiles streaked from its sides, slamming into enemy cruisers and tearing them to pieces. Beams of white energy cut through the darkness, slicing ships in half with precision. The Kranth tried to fight back, but their formation collapsed under the storm. Every volley they launched was answered with greater power. Their ships fell one after another, burning wrecks tumbling from the sky. The Tayari watched in disbelief, their mouths hung open, their hearts thundering. The cries of despair turned to gasps of awe. Tears streamed down their faces as they whispered the truth to themselves. Humanity had come, and humanity had not come softly. Relas gripped the console, his voice shaking. "Look at them, look at their firepower. This is not rescue, this is fury." The council nodded, unable to look away. The lesson was clear in every blast, in every shattered enemy ship. Humans did not arrive as gentle saviors. They arrived as storms, as fire given form. Above, the battle raged. The warship moved with terrifying grace, each strike deliberate, each kill certain. The Kranth, who had erased countless civilizations, now faced something they could not erase. On the ground, the people wept. Some fell to their knees, raising their hands to the sky. Others clung to each other, whispering prayers of thanks or fear. Children laughed for the first time in weeks, their eyes glowing as they pointed at the burning enemy ships. The night sky was no longer a place of shadows. It was a place of fire, and through that fire the human warship roared, unstoppable, unyielding, and merciless. The silence of the galaxy had ended. The stars burned with wreckage. Pieces of broken Kranth ships drifted slowly across the void, glowing like dying embers scattered on a black sea. Fires blazed in the heavens, small suns that flickered and went dark, leaving silence behind. The battle was over, but victory did not bring peace. The Tayari stood in the ruins of their cities, staring upward. Their faces were lit by the glow of falling debris, their hearts pounding with something far heavier than relief. The Kranth, who had seemed unstoppable, were gone, destroyed. Yet the humans, the Deathworlders, remained. Their warship hung above the planet like a mountain of steel, silent and unmoving. No words came from it, no message, no promise, no voice of reassurance, only silence. High Speaker Relas stood in the shattered council chamber, his robes covered in dust, his eyes fixed on the display showing the human ship. Around him, the elders whispered. Their voices carried both awe and fear. They came when no one else would. They answered our call, but why do they not speak? The comms officer tried once more, his voice shaking as he broadcast, across every channel, to the human ship in orbit. We are the Tayari, you saved us. Please, speak to us. Static filled the air, and no reply came. The silence pressed harder than the enemy bombardments ever had. It was heavy, suffocating, as though the entire world held its breath. On the surface, soldiers left their barricades and dropped their useless rifles. They looked at the sky, their faces pale in the glow of the human warship. Mothers carried children into the streets, pointing at the giant above them. Some whispered prayers of thanks, others bowed their heads, trembling. The question rippled through every mind, were these saviors or something far more dangerous? The warship moved slightly, engines flaring with pale light. It did not leave, it circled slowly, scanning the world below with beams of faint energy. Every city, every mountain, every ocean, nothing was hidden from its gaze. The Tayari felt as if their souls were being examined, stripped bare under its silent watch. Relas spoke at last, his voice low and heavy. This is not how saviors behave. This is how predators behave. The elders fell quiet. None could deny it. The humans had fought with unimaginable power. Yes, but they had done so without a word. No promise of friendship, no declaration of alliance, just fire and silence. The people began to whisper stories. In the bunkers, children said the humans were ghosts from the stars. In the streets, soldiers said they were demons made of steel. And in the council chamber, one elder whispered the old word with trembling lips. Deathworlders. The name carried fear. Legends told of humans beings forged on worlds so cruel they killed almost everything born upon them. Worlds of storms, fire, predators, and poison. To survive there was to become harder than stone, sharper than steel. The Tayari had never truly believed those tales. Now, staring at the silent warship, they did. Night fell, but the sky did not grow dark. Fires still burned across the cities. The warship glowed faintly, its cannons dim but alive, a reminder of what it could unleash again at any moment. Relas walked to the balcony of the ruined chamber. He looked out over the broken city, its towers collapsed, its streets scattered with smoke. His people gathered below, staring upward with wide eyes. Their voices drifted to him in fragments: fear, wonder, confusion. They saved us. No, they destroyed the Kranth. That is not the same thing. Why do they not speak? What do they want? Relas closed his eyes. The truth pressed heavy on his chest. He whispered the thought no one wanted to say aloud. They want nothing, and that is what makes them terrifying. Above, the warship shifted again. Smaller vessels detached, darting across the skies. They flew over the ruins, scanning with harsh beams of light. They did not attack, but they did not hide. Every movement felt deliberate, as though the humans wanted the Tayari to see how powerless they were beneath their shadow. In one street, a young soldier raised his head to the sky. His voice cracked as he whispered, "What if they turn those weapons on us?" Another soldier answered softly, his eyes never leaving the warship. "Then we will vanish. Just like the Kranth, there will be nothing we can do." Fear spread through the people like fire through dry grass. Gratitude battled dread in every heart. The humans had come when no one else did, but they had come as storms, not as friends. The hours dragged on. The silence did not break, and slowly the Tayari began to realize something far more unsettling than death itself. The humans did not need to speak. Their presence was the message. They had answered the plea for help, yes, but their answer was not mercy. Their answer was survival. And survival did not come softly. For days, the human warship had drifted above the planet, watching, waiting. The Tayari lived beneath its shadow, torn between gratitude and fear. They whispered prayers at night, asking the humans to leave or to speak, but the humans did neither. They remained vast and silent, their presence pressing like a weight on every heart. Then, without warning, the ship moved, engines flared brighter, casting long streaks of light across the sky. Cannons that had slept since the last battle came alive again, their barrels glowing with deadly energy. The world trembled as a low hum spread through the atmosphere, a sound so deep it shook bones. Every Tayari lifted their eyes to the heavens, breath caught in their throats, and then the storm began. The first blast tore through the night sky, a spear of white fire that slammed into the void above. Hidden Kranth shipstows that had cloaked themselves among the debris were ripped apart in a single heartbeat. The wreckage burned, scattering like meteors. The second blast followed, then the third. The human warship unleashed a fury unlike anything the galaxy had seen. Weapons fired in perfect rhythm, beams slicing across the heavens, missiles streaking like comets. The sky turned into a sea of explosions, every burst painting the world in firelight. The Kranth tried to answer. Their surviving fleets scrambled from the edges of the system, their formations breaking as they rushed forward. But they were too late. The humans had already begun their hunt. The warship moved with terrifying grace, every strike deliberate, every volley precise. Enemy cruisers split in half, dreadnoughts shattered, carriers burst into flame. The Kranth, once feared by every civilization, now scattered like frightened animals. On the surface, the Tayari stood in the streets, staring upward, their mouths hung open, their hearts racing. Some wept openly, clutching each other as the sky turned into a battlefield. Others fell to their knees, raising their hands in awe or fear. One soldier whispered, his voice almost lost in the roar, This is not rescue, this is war." Ralas stood in the council chamber, his eyes wide as the displays lit with fire. His voice shook as he spoke. "They do not fight to save us, they fight to erase." The elders watched in silence. They could not argue. The truth was burning above their heads. The humans were not gentle saviors, they were executioners, carrying out survival as though it were law. Hours passed, but the storm did not end. Every time the Kranth tried to regroup, the warship was there, cutting through them with merciless precision. No enemy ship lasted more than moments under its guns. Even the planet-side strongholds of the Kranth were not spared. The humans turned their weapons downward, striking hidden fortresses, buried bunkers, secret outposts. Mountains shook as fire tore them open. Oceans boiled where torpedoes fell. The land itself seemed to tremble under the human onslaught. Tayari could only watch. They were alive, yes, but survival came wrapped in terror. Their world burned brighter than ever before, but this time the flames belonged to their so-called saviors. In the ruins of a city, a mother held her child close as explosions lit the sky. The child smiled, pointing upward, believing the humans had come as heroes. The mother's eyes, however, were filled with dread. She knew what her child could not yet understand. Heroes do not stay silent while they destroy. The Kranth were finished. One by one their ships fell, their forces wiped out, their last screams lost in the roar of human guns. And when the last enemy vessel exploded, silence returned once more. The warship hung in orbit, its weapons dimming, its engines glowing faintly. The battlefield was nothing but wreckage and ash. The Kranth had been erased, but the silence was worse than the fire. Ralas leaned against the console, his voice breaking. "Do you see? They fight not for us, they fight because it is what they are. They are survivors, sharpened into weapons, and we are simply in their path." The council bowed their heads. None spoke. There was nothing left to say. Above, the warship did not move. It did not leave. It did not speak. It only watched. The Tayari people knew then what the galaxy had whispered for ages, but never truly believed. Humans were not legends. They were real, they were loud, they were unstoppable. And when they came, they did not come softly. They came as fire. The sky was quiet again, but it was not peace. Smoke from burning cities curled upward, mixing with the faint glow of debris still falling from orbit. Across the world, the Tayari emerged from their shelters, stepping carefully into the ruins. They looked at the heavens, and the great human warship still waited there. Silent, unmoving, a mountain of steel above their broken world. High Speaker Ralas stood in the shattered council chamber, his robes torn, his voice weary. He had watched the storm with his own eyes. He had seen how the humans had fought without hesitation, without mercy, without a single word. He pressed his hands against the edge of the console, staring at the image of the warship. "They destroyed," the Kranth One elder said softly, breaking the silence. "We are alive because of them." Another shook his head. "No, we are alive in spite of them." They did not fight for us. They fought because that is what they are. Relas closed his eyes. The words felt true, heavy as stone. The humans had come not as friends, not as saviors, but as a force of nature. The Kranth had been swept aside like dust in a storm, and the Tayari, though untouched, had been left trembling in the shadow of something even greater. On the surface, survivors whispered to each other. Children pointed at the warship with wide eyes, calling it an angel of fire. Parents hushed them, their own faces pale with unease. Soldiers sat among the rubble, their rifles lying forgotten, their gazes fixed on the sky. For the first time they felt what the Kranth must have felt, helpless in the face of overwhelming power. The warship moved slowly, engines glowing with pale fire. Smaller craft swept through the skies, scanning every ruin, every mountain. Every ocean lay destroyed, the last hidden outposts of the Kranth with ruthless efficiency. Buried bunkers vanished in fire. Submerged fortresses boiled to the surface and sank again as ash. The humans missed nothing. They see everything, Relas whispered, his voice trembling. They leave nothing behind. The council gathered closer, their fear unspoken but plain. The lesson was there in the fire, in the silence, in the cold precision of the human fleet. The Tayari had asked for mercy, but mercy had not come. What came instead was survival, sharpened into a weapon. Legends spoke of the humans, Deathworlders they were called, creatures forged on planets so hostile that even their own skies tried to kill them. Worlds of storms, ice, fire, and predators. To live there was to fight without end. To grow there was to become harder than stone. To thrive there was to learn that kindness had no place where survival was the only law. Now the Tayari knew the legends were true. The humans were not like the others. They did not measure their worth in compassion, but in endurance. They did not come with promises, but with fire. They were survivors, and to them, survival was the only truth that mattered. One elder turned to Relas, her eyes filled with both fear and awe. Perhaps this is their gift. They show us the truth of the galaxy, that survival belongs not to the gentle, but to the ruthless. Perhaps this is the lesson they have brought. Relas did not answer. His gaze remained fixed on the warship, his thoughts heavy. He wanted to believe the humans had saved them. He wanted to believe that behind that silence was mercy. But mercy did not look like this. Mercy did not burn the skies. Mercy did not erase an entire fleet without a single word. As night fell, the people gathered in the ruins, watching the sky together. Fires burned across the horizon, painting the darkness in red and orange. Above it all, the human ship remained, glowing faintly, silent as ever. In the streets, a young soldier whispered to his comrade, "What if they turn those weapons on us?" The other soldier shivered, shaking his head. "Then we will vanish. Just like the Kranth, there will be nothing left." The words spread quietly, passing from mouth to mouth. Gratitude and fear lived side by side in every heart. The Tayari had survived, but survival carried a new shadow. They were no longer afraid only of the Kranth. They were afraid of what had saved them. Relas returned to the balcony, his voice carrying to those below. "Do not mistake this for kindness," he said. "The humans are not gentle. They do not forgive. They do not comfort. They survive, and in their survival we too remain alive. But let us never forget their lesson is not mercy. Their lesson is fire." The people bowed their heads, silent, the truth settling heavy upon them. They had begged for aid, and aid had come. But it had not worn the face of friendship, it had worn the face of war. Above, the human warship shifted again, its silhouette blotting out the stars. Engines flared like suns, casting long shadows across the ruined cities. The people of the Tayari understood then what every species in the galaxy would one day learn. When humanity came, they did not come softly. They came loud. They came unstoppable, and they came with the law of survival carved into their very being. The battle was over, but the scars remained. The Tayari world lay in ruins, its cities broken, its skies choked with smoke. Fires burned where once towers had stood. The air was thick with the smell of ash and silence. Across the planet, survivors wandered through the wreckage, their eyes lifted always to the heavens. The human warship still hung above them, vast, silent, watching. For days, it had remained unmoving, its presence as heavy as a second sun. The people whispered that perhaps the humans had chosen to stay forever, to claim the world for themselves. Others believed the ship lingered only to make sure the Kranth were truly gone. Whatever the reason, the silence pressed harder with each passing hour. High speaker Relas stood on the balcony of the council chamber, its walls cracked and roof half collapsed. Below him, the people gathered, their voices low. They wanted answers, they wanted hope. But Relas had none to give. His eyes never left the sky. At last the warship moved. Engines flared, burning brighter than the stars. Smaller vessels broke formation and swept across the surface one final time, scanning the ruins, destroying the last traces of the Kranth with merciless precision. Hidden bunkers collapsed into dust. Submerged bases boiled away in plumes of steam. Every remnant of the enemy was erased. Then the smaller ships returned, and the great warship rose higher, slowly turning toward the void. The people gasped. Some cried out, begging them to stay. Others cheered, believing the nightmare was ending. But no one knew for certain what it meant. In the council chamber, Relas gripped the railing, his throat tight. His voice trembled as he spoke. "They are leaving." The elders turned to him, their faces filled with both relief and fear. One whispered, "Without a word." Relas nodded. Without a word. The engines of the warship roared, a sound that shook the world itself. Clouds split, oceans rippled, mountains echoed with the thunder. Slowly, the ship climbed, a mountain of steel rising into the heavens. Its shadow passed across cities and ruins alike, blotting out the sun as it ascended. The people fell to their knees. Some prayed, some wept, some stared in silence, unable to decide if they had witnessed salvation or judgment. And then, without warning, the void opened once more. Space rippled, stars bent, and the warship vanished into hyperspace, swallowed by darkness. The sky was empty again. The silence that followed was unlike any before. It was not the silence of despair. It was the silence of realization. The Tayari were alive. Their enemy was gone, but their survival carried a weight heavier than death. Relas turned back to his people, his face pale, his eyes shadowed. "Remember this day," he said softly, his voice carrying in the stillness. "We begged for aid, and aid came. But it was not kindness that answered, it was fire." The crowd lowered their heads. Children clutched their mothers. Soldiers stared at the ground, their hands trembling. None of them would ever forget the image of the warship, its cannons glowing, its silence louder than any voice. The elders gathered behind Relas. One spoke quietly. "What are they? Truly, saviors? Demons?" Relas shook his head. "Neither. They are survivors, forged on worlds that kill everything but the strongest. They do not come with mercy. They come with power, and when they arrive, the galaxy must bend or break." The word spread through the people like a shadow. Some took comfort, believing the humans were guardians who destroyed evil. Others shivered, fearing that one day the humans might decide they themselves were evil. Gratitude and dread lived side by side in every heart. As night fell, the fires burned low, and the stars returned to the sky. The people gathered in the streets, telling the story already. They spoke of the day the void had opened, of the warship that roared with thunder, of the enemy destroyed in fire. Children listened wide-eyed, their imaginations alive. They would grow up with this story, repeating it as legend. And in that legend, the truth would remain. When the galaxy abandoned them, the humans came. But they did not come softly. They came loud. They came unstoppable. They came as storms given shape. High Speaker Relas stood alone at the balcony long after the people had gone. He stared at the sky where the warship had vanished. His heart ached with both hope and fear. He whispered into the night, as though the humans might still hear. "May we never stand against you. May we only stand behind you." The stars gave no answer, only silence. But the silence carried a warning that every Tayari understood. Mercy is rare. Survival is law. And when humans arrive, they bring survival in the only form they know: fire and fury.